Hi, this is PH, and welcome to part 2 of the life of Jacob in Good Bible Knowledge. This is Jacob the heel grabber, who took everything he wanted for himself, even if it meant lying to his own father and stealing from his brother. Jacob learned very quickly what happens when you try to take God's blessing for yourself. And now we find Jacob on the run with nothing and in a foreign land. Jacob traveled to Haran and found his way to the house of Laban, his mother's uncle. Laban took him in as family, and Jacob worked as a shepherd caring for Laban's sheep. Now it just so happened that Laban had 2 daughters, Rachel and Leah. Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel, the younger daughter, and Jacob, the ever-shrewd opportunist, agreed to work for 7 years in order to gain Rachel's hand in marriage. After the 7 years were completed, Laban threw a great feast for their wedding. But on the night of the wedding, Laban, an even shrewder man, gave Leah, Rachel's older sister, to Jacob as his wife. Needless to say, this was quite a surprise to Jacob the next morning. Laban then agreed to give Rachel as Jacob's wife in exchange for an additional 7 years of labor. And in the following years, between the 2 wives and 2 servants, Jacob had 13 children. After a number of years, Jacob longed to return home again. And even when he was clearly blessed by God, he still found ways to cheat Laban out of his best flocks and livestock. While Laban was away shearing his sheep, Jacob took his family and all his possessions and fled back to his own country to face his brother Esau, who several years earlier had vowed to murder him. The evening before he was about to enter the land, Jacob prayed to God. That evening, after he had sent everyone across the ford of Jabbok, Jacob was alone, and he wrestled with a man from God until daybreak. Just when Jacob thought he had the upper hand, the man touched Jacob's hip, causing it to be put out of joint. Jacob continued to hold on to the man of God, crying out, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man of God responded, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel." As the man left, Jacob realized that he had wrestled with God and lived. That morning, Esau approached with an army of men. To Jacob's surprise, Esau greeted him with an embrace and tears, and the 2 departed in peace. After some time, God spoke to Jacob and called him and his family to get rid of all forms of idolatry, to purify themselves, and return to Bethel, where Jacob's journey first started. There, Jacob built an altar and worshipped the Lord as a changed man. It was at this time that Jacob properly received the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant. Jacob's journey is an illustration of God's grace. Jacob the heel grabber started out as a selfish, proud opportunist who always found a way to take the things that he wanted. One might say that eventually the consequences of his actions finally caught up with him. But God has another story to tell. It was God's plan to bring Jacob on a journey of humility and brokenness, where Jacob learned what it feels like to be cheated, where instead of grasping for blessing, he was grasping onto God, and where instead of receiving retribution, he received mercy. This is not just the story of Jacob. It is the story of God, who calls us to understand the consequences of sin, who wants us to seek Him rather than His blessings, and who through Jesus offers mercy and forgiveness when we approach Him with humility. Thanks for listening to another episode of Good Bible Knowledge. We'll see you next time.